recorded. I'm starting the recording now, and that recording will be distributed via a link in an email via our video page on YouTube after this recording, after this webinar has finished. And we'll also send out a PDF of the slides. So you'll have both those resources for you, and we usually send that within a couple days of the broadcast. So that will be available for you if you need it or want to share it with colleagues and so on and so forth. I have with me in the room several applications engineers. That questions pane that you just typed into, you can type any question at any time into that pane, and Tom Gaudette, Mike Leatham, and Ray Labby will be there to assist you and answer your questions, and you'll see their names pop up as they answer any and all questions that you have. So it could be about the presentation, but it also could be about anything else involving Kepware, and they'll do their best to answer that for you. I also have the line on the line with me, Product Manager Glenn Marquis. Let him introduce himself here, but he will be a co-presenter of mine presenting the BACnet portion. So welcome, Glenn.
Great, thanks, Joanne, and hello, everyone. Glenn Marquis. I oversee the power, energy, and utility space here with Kepware.
Wonderful. Thank you, Glenn, for being on the line, and you'll hear from him in a little bit. So, like I said, PDF of the slides, link to the webinar recording will be distributed after this broadcast. And if you're interested in upcoming webinars, you can follow our Kepware Product training page on LinkedIn to get updates on upcoming webinars. You can go to Kepware's training website. We have upcoming webinars there as well. And we're going to have some upcoming webinars having to do with IoT and some of our IoT partners. So if that interests you, I would definitely stay tuned and follow us on that page. Great. So for those of you online, some of you might not be totally familiar with Kepware. You might be new to us or familiarizing yourself with us. So just going to give a brief introduction for the people that are new on the line. So Kepware Technologies, we were established in 1995, so about 2 decades ago, and we started in the discrete manufacturing space but have since expanded, and as Glenn will show us in a little bit, about building automation and power and all types of other types of vertical industries. We're all over the world. We have a really great partner network all over the world, so if you are in some other part of the world, we can hook you up with people that are local that can help you with Kepware. And we, have a lot of great products and continue to improve our products, as this version 520 release webinar will discuss with you. So we have 4 software products. The main flagship product is KEPServerEX, and this is a communications platform. When you purchase a driver from us, when you connect via OPC or maybe some other connection, DDE, using like an Excel document, or ODBC for a database, you're using KEPServerEX to connect that application, and then you use a driver to connect down to a PLC or a device that you might have on your plant floor. So all of that's wrapped up in KEPServerEX. But we do have, the 4 other products. One, Redundancy Master, serves as OPC DA server failover. And before we get into KEPServerEX, which the majority of this webinar will be about, I do just want to mention that we did recently update Redundancy Master. We released a new version in February, version 2.0.128. And you can go to the Redundancy Master web page on our website to see that. And it's just fixes, enhancements, security updates, and if you're interested in learning more, you can obviously contact us. So, KEPServerEX. This is the what we call like block diagram or main architecture of the server. This is how we break it down to kind of simplify it for people that are new to the platform. In the green down below on the bottom of this diagram, you see what we call drivers, and that communicates with data sources and devices and gathers data through different physical interfaces, Ethernet, serial, maybe a radio modem, and so on, and communicates over those different physical interfaces via different protocols. So you might have Modbus, you might have Common Industrial Protocol, which is used in Allen Bradley controllers for that protocol. And then you might have something like BACnet, which we're going to discuss a lot more in a little bit with Glenn. And then on the top side, the yellow side, you have what we call our client interfaces. So this allows you to connect to a client to request data through something, maybe you have an OPC client. If you're using like a traditional SCADA or HMI system, it's probably OPC enabled. Maybe you're connecting to a database via ODBC, or maybe you're connecting to a web page using HTTP in our RESTful interface. So you can subscribe to data through certain interfaces, read and write data through certain interfaces to gain access to those data sources. So a lot of people, it's easier for them to conceive of us or think of us as like a middleware or a protocol converter, and that's one of the reasons we have such worldwide penetration, is because we're really pretty agnostic as far as what we're connecting to. We have a very broad range of connectivity, and we don't really favor any one vendor. So before we move on, I have a nice little poll question, kind of engage you here. I just want to know, are you currently using Kepware software? So just want to see who's maybe new on the line, maybe still investigating Kepware, but who else maybe is actually using us. Help us kind of tailor our content as we move through this webinar. So please take a moment to answer this poll question. I'll leave it open for about 30 more seconds. So are you currently using Kepware software? Yes, no, or maybe you're not sure. Maybe your company might be using it, but you're not sure, you don't know. All right, so I'll leave that open for a few more seconds. Please answer the poll question if you would take a moment to do so. And wonderful. So I'll just share those results with you. Looks like 2/3 of people on this webinar say yes, they are, but then the other third are either in the no category, unsure, or don't know. So perhaps you're not an end user, perhaps you're someone who is another vendor in the space checking us out, or perhaps you are a person, a system integrator or a reseller who's checking us out. So we welcome you on the line and hope to work with anybody who perhaps isn't using us quite yet. Okay, so one more poll question. For those of you who are Kepware users, how much experience do you have configuring KEPServerEX? So how many of you are pretty savvy with the server? So you would rate yourself a 5, as in you're an expert configuring the server and getting it set up, and you've used it in many circumstances before. Or you're 1, you have no experience. So you might be, it might be installed in your system, you might be using it, but you don't have any experience configuring it. So take a moment to answer that question. And answer that if you would, and I'll leave that open for a couple seconds more. Great. So it looks like we have people all over the spectrum, some experts on the call, but a little more heavily weighted towards the side of the spectrum where we have some beginners with no experience. So that's great to know. So thank you for answering those. Like I said, I'll help us tailor our content to you as we go through here. So KEPServerEX version 5.20, for those of you on the call who answered yes, you're using our software. You're probably using an earlier version, since this just came out last week, or 1 week ago on May 3rd. We do, as a best practice, recommend that you upgrade, and we'll discuss in a moment what features have been upgraded. But I do want you to note that lots of things that have been enhanced and changed in version 5.20 we're not necessarily going to highlight and discuss today. We're going to discuss the major ones, but if you're interested in learning about the other small things that have been tweaked or improved, you can see our release notes on the website. And there's lots of things that we improve from version to version. So if you're experiencing any pain points with earlier versions, upgrading to the new one often solves that. So overall, this release impacts 24 drivers and 6 advanced plugins. So like I said, see those release notes for technical details. The major enhancements we're going to spend a lot of time speaking to today are the IoT Gateway, and then Glenn will come in and talk to us about enhancements to the BACnet IP driver. Some minor other enhancements are OBC UA and DA client drivers, Allen Bradley. We pretty much improve our Allen Bradley ControlLogix Ethernet driver on every release, and our EFM Exporter for the oil and gas market. We also have some changes to Windows support. 5.20 is now only supported on Windows XP, SP3, and higher. That is due to Microsoft. That's not an internal decision we necessarily made, randomly, Microsoft has changed security policies since Windows XP SP2 and earlier systems, which have caused Kepware, but not only Kepware, other software vendors to support only XP, SP3, and higher. So that's basically Microsoft trying to push people to newer systems. And so Windows XP, SP3, and higher for this release, as well as hardware keys. If you're using our hardware keys for licensing, they're now supported on Windows 10. So let's talk about some of those smaller enhancements. OPC UA and OPC DA client drivers now support 64-bit data types. So that's great for those of you who are working with those systems that support those larger data types, so double, long, keyword. Allen Bradley ControlLogix Ethernet. We now have support for ControlLogix firmware version 28, and Allen Bradley came out with a new family of controllers called the LAX controller family, and we support that as well with this new release. So if you're using those newer controllers or the newer firmware, 520 now supports that. And then for the oil and gas market, our EFM, or electronic flow measurement exporter, now supports export of liquid EFM data to CSV files and database tables, so database meaning ODBC supported databases. And previously, gas exports did support these file formats, so the change here is that now liquid data can be collected via CSV and database tables. Previously, liquid only supported the FlowCal CFX format. So a change for those of you who are using our EFM exporter for how you can export in the formats you can use. Great, so let's move on to the major topics in this release, and one is the IoT Gateway. So the IoT Gateway streams real-time machine and sensor data into these cloud-based software platforms. So they could be on-premise, but typically we also think of IoT, the kind of advent of leveraging the cloud more. So cloud-based software platforms that you can use for business analytics, machine learning, predictive analysis, and so on. And you might have heard the buzz about this. I'm sure you have. We debuted this in version 5.19 last fall, this IoT plugin. And in its debut release, the IoT Gateway from Kepware provided what we call agents, 3 agents. An MQTT client for connecting to MQTT brokers, the RESTful server, and REST client, which both support HTTP for connecting to web servers and web pages, web clients, so on, and so forth. So those were 3 original ones that we supported, and now in this release we added the ThingWorx agent, and we'll discuss more about that in just a moment. So Kepware has partnered up with other companies for kind of making complete IoT solutions. Kepware, as I described in the beginning, and as a lot of you probably know, is the connectivity piece. We provide all the standards, all the processing, all the connectivity and network infrastructure that you would need to be able to gather your data and serve it up to different platforms. But in order to better serve our customers, we created an IoT alliance to partner up with other software companies that do things like the cloud-based platforms, big data analytics, enable customers to develop their own applications, and so on. So it allows our customers to come to us and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing for kind of an IoT solution. I'd like to do some predictive analysis or machine visibility, and we partner up with these other software companies in order to enable you to do that. So we do have an entire webinar series dedicated to this. We've done 4 in the series so far with a bunch of our partners, other software partners in our IoT Alliance. So please visit our video page on the website to view the previous IoT Alliance webinars that we did that highlight these solutions. And we'll have a couple more coming up this summer, so stay tuned for that. So just very quickly, kind of baby introduction to IoT. Where is IoT being used? The obvious, most compelling use case for IoT is remote monitoring. You have a bunch of assets out in the field that typically are gated in some way. They can't natively talk in some way to our platform and to other platforms that you might have. So remote monitoring is enabling those devices to be directly connected up to the cloud or your systems is a very compelling use case. Building controls and services, Glenn will speak a little bit to that and describe how perhaps you can that might hook into kind of some of our BACnet offering. But, you know, if you have a building and you want to do some predictive or preventative maintenance, so, you know, you don't want to shut down a building, you want to be able to, you know, predict that a cooler or chiller or blower is going to fail before, you know, someone in the building complains about it. And then safety, security, and compliance checks. So just wondering, are you considering implementing IoT systems? So another poll question for you. Are you considering implementing IoT systems? Are you doing any of those type of use cases that I outlined previously, remote monitoring, energy efficiency, supplier visibility, perhaps for a reason not listed, or no, not at this time? So go ahead and answer that poll question if you would. Are you considering implementing IoT systems? Yes for remote monitoring, energy efficiency, supplier visibility, for a reason not listed, or no, not at this time. It's a multi-select question, so you can select multiple answers if you so wish. And I'll leave that open for a few more seconds, so vote if you would. And I'll share the results with you when people have voted, all right? So it looks like about 50% of the people, a little over 50%, are actually using or considering implementing IoT systems. So that's great to see. And some of you say no, not at this time. However, you might already have plans in place to actually implement something. So maybe not at this time, but that's something on your mind. So great, thank you for answering that. So let's talk about our new ThingWorx agent that is new in the IoT Gateway for version 5.20. So it's based on, now ThingWorx, we did have ThingWorx connectivity previously. They had an OBCDA connector that we could leverage to get data from Kepware into ThingWorx. This ThingWorx agent, however, leverages something called the long haul protocol, which is native to ThingWorx and is more secure and is you know, reliable for getting that edge industrial data into ThingWorx server and any reliable any IoT-enabled applications that are using ThingWorx technology. So if you haven't heard of ThingWorx before, it's a pretty widely adopted IoT technology platform. And what it does is allows developers to quickly connect anything in their ecosystem, create and deploy applications. They do these things called mashups, and it can be pretty cool. So we'll definitely be you know, posting more information about ThingWorx, but you can go to ThingWorx website. They have a great community page where if you're a developer and you're interested in leveraging ThingWorx in your environment, then you can experiment with it. So right now the ThingWorx agent is read-only functionality, so you can only read data into the ThingWorx platform, but we are actively, you know, have plans to make it two-way communication. So let's demo this. So I'm just going to pull up a VM. And it'll just take a minute for my screen to sync here. All right, so you can see here I have KEPServerEX and my trustworthy simulator driver that I'm going to be using to just simulate some data that I'm going to push into or going to give ThingWorx the ability to read. I have ThingWorx set up here. This is a local instance that I have on this VM. And I set this up in advance. I set up what's called an application key and a remote thing that I've named KEPServerEX. So in order to set this up, I had to do a little work before the webinar, and I'm not going to show how I did that here. But if you are interested in setting something like this up for your own tests and trials, just contact us and we can help you out. So if I go back into KEPServerEX, I'm going to go into the drop-down menu here and select the IoT Gateway. If you don't see this drop-down menu or the IoT Gateway, you just need to go through the install again and make sure you select that from the plugins list. In the IoT Gateway, you see I already have some agents set up here. Some of our older our agents that were originally introduced, MQTT client, REST client, REST server, and then I also have a ThingWorx agent set up here, and this is actually pointing to a remote cloud-hosted server that I have going. But I'm going to create a new agent from scratch here, and the one thing about creating the ThingWorx agent is this name that I enter here. It can be anything I want, so I'm choosing KEPServerEX. However, it does have to match that remote thing in ThingWorx that I've created in Composer here. So this name here, KEPServerEX, for that remote thing I've created has to match that for this to work. So one little note there for you. I'm going to choose the ThingWorx agent, which will be available in 520. We use WebSockets here to facilitate this connection, so I'm just going through 80. If you're using TLS, you would use WSS, and then you might be going through the standard port there for 443. And then the next thing I need to do is copy my application key, so I'm going to copy the key I created from in my Composer here, and I will need that application key to match in order to get connectivity. And for ease of this demo, I'm just going to trust all SSL certificates, which you might not want to do if security is a concern for you. So I'm going to finish, and you see I get a message here that I'm running with Java. So our IoT Gateway does use Java. You'll need the most recent version to run this. So if it's not working, that might be your issue, and you'll see messages in the event log telling you that you'll need Java. And then I am going to click here and click to add IoT items to open my tag browser. And I'm going to go into my simulation examples functions and just grab ramp4, random4, sign4, and user4 and apply that. Scan rate, so how fast do I want to scan for data changes from the server for these items? So the default is 1 second, I'll leave it there. And you have the option to only send data on data changes and specify a percentage deadband. Or you can send data every scan regardless of whether it's changed or not. And this feature, this every scan feature, is something we also added in this release to our IDF for Splunk plugin. So if you're a Splunk user, this feature is now available in that Splunk plugin as well. So I'm going to say OK here, and I have those 4 tags, and I shortly see a message in my event log that says I'm connected to the ThingWorx platform. So that's great. So now if I go into my remote thing, my remote object here for KEPServerEX in my ThingWorx Composer, and go to Properties, I already set up these properties point towards those specific tags. And if I refresh this, I see the fresh data coming through. And now if I had a mashup or some type of web page displaying data or some type of analytics going on to evaluate this data, I would be able to use all that data from Kepware in my ThingWorx platform here. Great, so simple demo. Again, didn't go over the ThingWorx specifics of how setting that up, how that's set up, but if you're interested in that, I can always contact us, training@kepware.com, and we can always help you with that. All right, other enhancements. So we also enhanced our MQTT client agent in v520. So the agent now can receive writes. So any other MQTT applications that are subscribed to topics on an MQTT broker that Kepware is also connected to that MQTT broker, you'll be able to execute commands and controls through KEPServerEX. So command and control, actual things happening in your process. We also now support cross-origin resource sharing, CORS, as well as a customizable payload format, which applies to both the client agents for MQTT and REST. So previously, the message payload that we were sending over the wire with this channel device tag and value quality timestamp data that you see displayed in the upper right there, this payload was represented in JSON. So that's a Java script object that has this data, and it was just a format. You couldn't change that format, and it was just kind of static, and that's how it was represented. Now we implemented a templating engine. You can leverage it by selecting our advanced template in the format message properties for those agents. And the payload can be represented in other formats such as XML, HTML, and many more, or you can customize that JSON payload to be more flexible. So this template is much more flexible, and it basically what it allows you to do, for those of you familiar with these sort of technologies, is it allows you to comply with other IoT applications that maybe have rigid formatting constraints. For example, you're inputting data to a non-relational database in a specific format, and you need to make sure KEPServerEX can push or can format the data in that correct format. All right, so there's lots of resources for the IoT Gateway. Our website has tons and tons of information and resources available. Salm Elsner, Senior Applications Engineer here, did a great IoT Gateway demo video that's very quick and shows you how to very quickly set it up and leverage it. We have a Made Easy guide, which walks you through setting it up very quickly. And then, like I said, we have our IoT Alliance webinar series that shows you how this can be used with different platforms. So tons and tons of information on the IoT Gateway. So we're ready to move on to our BACnet IP driver. I'm about to pass it over to Glenn. Before I do that, I'm just going to ask you a poll question about BACnet. So, you know, about 50% of you were interested in leveraging IoT technology. Are any of you actually using BACnet with KEPServerEX? So let's see who on the wire is currently using BACnet driver for KEPServerEX. So leave this open for a few seconds. And please vote if you have not yet. So how many of you are using the BACnet driver for KEPServerEX? Yes, you are using it. No, you're not. And this will be good for Glenn too, because for the people who say no, he'll be able to kind of explain a little more on the background of BACnet and how it works and how it can be maybe useful in ways that you never even realized. Okay, great. So I'm going to close out that poll. Thank you for giving us. It looks like majority of people are not using it, but we'll let Glenn explain some of the background as to why you might want to.
Excellent. Thanks again, Joanne, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the line. Glad you could join us. So as we just learned, most people on the webinar could use a little bit of background on BACnet. So let me just do my best to give you a quick overview. You know, BACnet's essentially a communications protocol for the building automation and control network. It's completely non-proprietary, open standard that's been developed specifically for the control and monitoring of building automation controllers and devices. So think in terms of items like, you know, thermostats and sensors, chillers, heating elements, things of that nature that seem to be all around us. So the standard is all about interoperability among vendors, and it enables the quick exchange of data between multiple different hardware and software products, such as building automation controllers, gateway devices, routers, operator workstations, and certain diagnostic tools. Typical building automation applications, again, are around us in our everyday lives, including heating, ventilation, and air conditioning control, lighting, physical access control, security, waste management, and fire detection. So what about our BACnet over IP driver? Over the first several years of its release, which was back in March of 2005, the BACnet IP driver has become one of our top tier drivers with consistent year-over-year growth. The driver allows users to connect, manage, monitor, and control a variety of automation devices and software applications, everything from building automation and building management systems to enterprise IT systems. So because BACnet uses what's termed an object-oriented model for abstracting and representing the information, the approach includes a list of standard objects that cover many common and generally useful applications. So Kepware currently supports what we have found to be most of the more common used standard objects. A few of them are included here: analog, binary, multi-state input, output and value, calendar, averaging, file, command, device, event enrollment, program, schedule, and trend log. So while KEPServer might not be the first or the obvious choice for many of your building applications, there's a whole bunch of different very capable BACnet specific SCADA systems on the market. These include operator workstations that gracefully attach to SCADA or HMI systems, but there's a lot of use cases where KEPServer, in combination with the BACnet driver, it makes a lot of sense. For example, maybe you want to link non-BACnet devices within your existing BACnet system. Perhaps you have a number of non-BACnet PLCs in the environment controlling existing air handling and lighting equipment, but you'd like to feed that information to your BACnet SCADA or even trigger an action on the PLC based on those BACnet events. Maybe you have a large campus-wide BACnet SCADA that's controlling and monitoring a whole variety of operations. You could use the BACnet driver to feed that information into a centralized non-BACnet SCADA or HMI system. Maybe perhaps you have corporate level folks within your organization that would like to know the power consumption of a specific building on a more consistent basis. Maybe there's an enterprise-wide energy efficiency initiative that's in place to reduce overall power consumption. A combination of BACnet over IP driver and our IoT Gateway, this BACnet data can be pushed from your BACnet to a long list of potential client applications, again including IT networks, to feed dashboards or analytic tools. So we're pretty excited about these improvements to the driver. We hope that these will provide additional value to commercial and industrial customers. First of all is the support of a new standard object, the accumulator object. Primarily used for, it's essentially a meter-related object type. We now support that in all of its required properties. Primarily used to accurately collect and monitor energy usage data for peak load measurement and for accounting and billing purposes. It allows for efficient, accurate comparison of consumption data. So for example, in an electrical metering application, you'd use the accumulator object to more accurately calculate kilowatt hour usage. The same holds true for metering other consumption meters such as gas, heat, or water. Next, we spent a lot of time enhancing our command priority settings. So now previous versions allowed only a single command priority to be used for all tags on a BACnet device, which are represented by BACnet objects. Now users have the ability to individually assign a BACnet command priority to tags for more complicated devices that may be aggregating several controllers that don't currently allow for direct BACnet communication. This essentially allows users to temporarily adjust the command priority of any commandable object in order to manage a non-standard operation such as maintenance or maybe an alarm condition. Quick example, maybe your BACnet fire suppression systems need to override a standard operation of an air handler in the event or in the case of a fire. Or maybe an air handler needs to be maintained, and prior to lockout, technician wants to manually shut this down to override the HVAC system. These changes we hope would provide the operator the ability to designate command priorities at an object level. This would result in increased productivity, workflow efficiencies, and certainly in safety. In terms of alarm and event services, we now support confirmed and unconfirmed event notifications for the following event states: change of value, change of state, out of range, unsigned range, command failure. So unlike polling, the values are only delivered when they alarm. This reduces network traffic. Notifications are a different service than what you may be familiar with in terms of change of value or COV. These allow objects that don't support COV to notify those that are subscribed that a condition has actually occurred. So we've also added support for an additional character set, the IBM Microsoft DBCS, and this character set is primarily intended to support the Japanese market. And finally, we've developed a protocol implementation conformance statement, or a PICS. This is a document that describes all of the driver's current BACnet supported properties, as well as all the services that are supported.
Great, so I'm going to hop out of the presentation here for a moment to do the BACnet demo. Thanks, Glenn, for that. He's going to hop on again when I'm done with the demo in order to show you to wrap up BACnet and to talk about kind of the future there. So here I have what's called an NAE, and this is from Johnson Controls. So NAE stands for Network Automation Engine, and it's a device that supports BACnet, and it does building control. So this is actually a device that we have on site here at our Kepware headquarters. And here I'm looking at a couple objects in the NAE. I'm looking at an accumulator object. So that's one of the objects that Glenn just described, and can give you all different types of information about consumption and information over a period of time. So you see here the different attributes of the object represented. So for example, present value 7, value set 7, so on and so forth. And if I hop back over to my other VM where I have this BACnet device connected now, for those of you maybe not familiar with our BACnet offering, we do have device discovery where you can browse the network for BACnet devices. So I just generated this device here using our BACnet device discovery on the channel level. And you can see it's ID 112 there. And so if you look at this BACnet device, you can see here that I have a bunch of tags already in here, and one of those correlates to that same accumulator object that we saw here in the Metasys, which gives us the configuration for that NAE device. And if I go into device properties, just want to show you real quick that we do support database creation, so you can auto-create tags from the device, directly from the device. And if you go into the tag import tab here in device properties and you select objects, you see all the different objects that we support. So there's only a few that I actually auto-generated for, but here you see there's a bunch of other objects that we support if you're interested in kind of leveraging this. So it might be interesting, this type of thing, for those of you not using it, building control information, especially if your process is sensitive to the environment of the building, to humidity, to temperature, so on and so forth, and you're using, you have a facility staff that's using BACnet controllers, you can actually bring this into your control systems or into those cloud-based systems to mash up that building data with process data to maybe get a more accurate view of how your environment is perhaps affecting your process. So tons of neat ways to leverage this data and to maybe form new partnerships if you do have a facilities group that is already using these BACnet objects and you're using Kepware. So just some background on that. If I launch my quick client here and go to that accumulator object, I see this is how the attributes in that accumulator object are represented in KEPServerEX. So each attribute, the accumulator object itself gets a tag group, and then each attribute gets a tag. So there's present value of 7, value set 7, and then all the other attributes that we support in the tag format from that accumulator object. So the other thing that Glenn spoke about that's new in this release is things like supporting alarming, intrinsic alarming, which is if you have an object here like an analog output, so this just gives us an analog output of temperature, I can actually intrinsically to this object set up a BACnet alarm, and I can set an alarm that says, okay, notify me if this value goes to default, and then notify me if it goes back to normal, and then I can enable low limits and high limits. So this is something new that we are now, these intrinsic alarms are now supporting. So that analog object, which we see represented here, or analog output, now has these different alarms that will actually allow us to gather alarm data from there. And so instead of constantly polling that device to see if the data has changed or if it's in a fault state, you can conserve network bandwidth because we're now just sitting there waiting for the alarm, intrinsic alarm to notify us that there's been a change. So we won't be polling if we're looking for those alarms. And if I get out of the quick client here, that's set up in device properties in this event notifications tab. So this tab is new in v520, and if I have that enabled, you can see I'm monitoring my analog output there for alarms, and I can add my object type here. So any object that supports either intrinsic or algorithmic alarming, I can add the object type, the instance number, and if it's in this list, that means I'm monitoring it for alarms. So it is very helpful to use our help. If you're interested in learning more about these alarms and how to set them up and how to get that alarm and event data into the server, we've added a pretty comprehensive set of help files in this release to walk you through that, about how to get those event and alarm notifications, how to leverage this new functionality. We do support CSV import export, so how do you format that CSV if perhaps you have 500 or 1,000 different objects that you want to monitor for alarms. You're not going to sit in that window for event notifications to add them all individually, so you can use the import-export tools there. Great, and then I do want to mention for this alarm list, if you're using what's called algorithmic alarms, which are set up in these event enrollment objects, you're going to want to add the event enrollment object to this list as well as the object that it's alarming on. So, for example, if I go to my event enrollment object here, this is my event enrollment object alarm that's called an algorithmic alarm. It's also alarming off of the value of analog output. And I can see, you know, it's pointing towards analog output. So if I want to catch what's called an algorithmic alarm, I'll need to add analog output to this list as well as the event enrollment object. So then the last thing Glenn spoke to was the fact that we have tag level command priority for overriding the value of variables. So here you can see right now we're sitting at priority 2 and the present value is 100. So if I wanted to say, you know, change and skip down to another part of this array, I would do this by writing to present value priority and be able to change the present value based on what the priority is. So for example, maybe in normal operating mode, you know, your blower is set to turn on at certain times and turn off at certain times, and that's, you know, that's all determined by the controller, and that's set at a certain priority. Well, if you get into a situation where it's like an emergency situation, you need to absolutely shut that blower off because there's a fire or something, you can hop to a higher priority that has a different value that is set for those emergency types of scenarios. So maybe a little hard for those of you who are not familiar with BACnet to understand, but hopefully those who are familiar with BACnet maybe kind of understand what's happening here, so that you can basically just command this present value using the priority array. Okay, great. So that is it for my demo. I'm going to skip back to the presentation here. And let Glenn take over again.
Excellent. Thank you again. Hopefully that demonstration was helpful for the audience. So I just have a quick summary slide here. You know, in terms of BACnet over IP, BACnet standard is pretty well established. It's extremely well adopted, and it's growing internationally. The reason we've chosen to focus some of our resources towards these enhancements is primarily due to the rising interest in integrated energy management solutions. You know, we see more BACnet compatible devices and controllers entering the marketplace, and we feel like this is a market that will certainly continue to grow. So it's notable that some of this work to the BACnet IP driver was originally developed in pretty close collaboration with Johnson Controls. You know, we have a lot of good relationships with hardware vendors and OEMs. JCI has been extremely helpful for us, and this is going to provide users with even more powerful and flexible connectivity options. We hope that it better positions Kepware in this growing market. Some notable regions that are seeing this growth include parts of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And essentially, these improvements hopefully will allow channel partners and customers to just further enhance their compatibility with the latest BACnet specification. So similar to the IoT Gateway, there's a whole bunch of additional information on both the specification itself as well as our BACnet over IP driver located on the website. Product pages have been updated. They all include helpful supporting documentation such as updated user manuals and some relevant reference material, for example, some technical white papers and use case studies. So we're pretty excited about these changes in BACnet. We hope to hear from you guys with any additional questions that you might have. And let me pass it back over to Joanne.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Glenn. And hopefully that was useful for those of you who don't use it, and definitely useful for those of you who are currently using our BACnet driver. And so we have some great questions coming over the line, so we'll continue to answer those as we wrap up here. So conclusion, major enhancements. IoT Gateway, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Tons and tons of resources available about our IoT Gateway. You can always contact us directly. Our technical sales team will give you a demo. You can always contact training@kepware.com. Anybody you contact will get you in touch with the right person. BACnet IP driver, learned a lot about that today and how that can be used and the enhancements to it. And then the brief enhancements I mentioned in the beginning for our UA client and DA client drivers that support 64-bit data types now. Bradley ControlLogix Ethernet driver now supports the latest firmware version 28 and the L8X controller family, and then our EFM Exporter, which supports the CSV and database export formats. So again, this was just the IoT Gateway and the BACnet IP driver were obviously the major enhancements, but this is just a sampling of every single thing that we packed into this release. So our release notes are always available on the website if you're interested in learning more about what this release entails, and again, we do recommend upgrading as a best practice. So poll question here. From what you saw today, would you like to use any of those products discussed and available in 520? So yes, you'd like to use the IoT Gateway. Yes, you're interested in using that BACnet IP driver that Glenn did a great job of describing. Yes, you'd like to use our OPC UA client driver, which connects to OPC UA servers and can also be used for something called tunneling, where basically you wrap information in that's not maybe network compatible or easily remotely accessed in OPC UA. Yes, you'd like to use the newest support updates that are available with Allen Bradley ControlLogix Ethernet driver or something else, or not at this time that's not listed. I only get 5 options when I do these poll questions, so I can't always list every single option available. So please answer that. I'll wait for you guys to vote. Would you like to use any of the products discussed today that are available in this new KEPServerEX version 520? So yes, the IoT Gateway, BACnet IP driver, UA client driver, Allen Bradley ControlLogix, or something else, or not at this time. Okay, great. Thank you for voting. I'll share this with everybody. And it looks like this is great numbers here. It looks like 50% of you say the IoT Gateway, and about 50% of you say OPC UA client driver, which those are both really great pieces of technology. So good to see that. And then the BACnet IP driver, a third of you were interested in that. And then, of course, Allen Bradley is a perennial favorite of many people in the process industry. So wonderful. Thank you for answering that. Now, for resources, if you're interested in attending training, we do offer training once monthly at our Portland main office. We do offer on-site training if you have a group of people at your facility that, anywhere from 4 to maybe 15 people that would need training, and we can customize that training specific to that group of people. We can offer short blocks, 2 to 4 hour blocks of web training for individual companies. So if you'd like to do that, you can go to our training webpage, email us at training@kepware.com, or fill out our training request form. Other webinars, videos, and demonstration always posted on YouTube, but also on our video page on the website. So it's a couple places that you can find our different webinars and videos. Again, if you're interested in upcoming webinars, so we are doing more IoT Alliance webinars with some pretty compelling partners that I'm not going to announce yet, but they're you'll probably be interested in them. Follow our Kepware product training page on LinkedIn to get updates about the upcoming webinars. And then we have a great blog as well that just talks about all types of news, so follow that as well if you're interested. Here's our contact information. Several of you, I saw the questions coming in as we presented. We're asking questions about maybe sort of technical sales related. How do I set XYZ up in order to work with this system? Just email sales@kepware.com if you have those type of questions. So I saw some questions come in about data logger. How do we set data logger, set it up to log to X database? So great questions for our technical sales team, and they can always help you out. Again, you can email training@kepware.com. Technical support, call them, extension 211, or email them if you have any tech support questions. We have a little bit of time, so we could probably answer some of these questions coming in over the wire if you're interested, Glenn. Maybe we could do some BACnet.
There's a few questions, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, we had a general question come in about the actual URL for more information on BACnet. So you can certainly navigate to kepware.com and search under products, but I did list the actual URL. Again, it has a lot of information on there, has supporting documentation, user manuals, specification information, and sort of some additional white papers and case studies that we can certainly make available if you want to contact me or anyone at the team here directly.
Thank you, Glenn. I have an interesting question coming through. We utilize BACnet IP driver to push information into an industrial front end. This is from Rick. What would be the easiest way to leverage the usage of intrinsic alarms that are now available, or would we need to build up separate alarm tags? So, I think that's a pretty straightforward question.
Although I was reading a different question.
Oh, you were.
Sorry.
So basically, I think he's saying what would be the easiest way to leverage intrinsic alarms. So I can do this one if you don't mind, Glenn. So basically, just point in that event notification tab in device properties. Just add in the object that has the intrinsic alarm with its correct number, its correct ID, and if it's set up with intrinsic alarms, which you can do through, for example, we are using Metasys to configure that NAE controller, so you do it through the configuration software for that controller. You set up those intrinsic alarms, and then as long as that object is in that event notification list and device properties, will get those alarms from the intrinsic alarms from that device. You also have the option to use the event enrollment objects and set up what's called algorithmic alarms. So you can do it a couple ways, and the reason we support algorithmic alarming is in case an object doesn't support intrinsic alarming. So if you're working with an object that doesn't support those intrinsic BACnet alarms, like I showed you that analog output that did support it, you can use algorithmic alarming. So if you have more questions like that, Rick, yeah, definitely feel free to contact us and we can give you more details on that. Interesting question from Mark Frey. How much is training? It's $1,500 USD for if you come to Portland, Maine. But we are always offering incentives for people to come to training. So contact us if you're interested in that. If you're interested in exploring your options there, because we're definitely willing to work with you on that. Interesting question about automatic tag generation from Siemens TIA portal. Interesting because I was actually just talking with Mike Leatham, one of the application engineers online here, about this yesterday. Definitely an enhancement request that we have on our backlog. Definitely a request we've heard loud and clear, especially from our European and Asian markets who use that, who use the Siemens controllers, the S7 controllers heavily. And we are definitely currently evaluating that as an enhancement. If you are interested, Lars, in that as an enhancement, please contact us, sales@kepware.com, give us some details, and our team would love to hear from you on your requirements for ATG, automatic tag generation from the TIA portal, and being able to grab tags from KEPServerEX or from TIA portal directly into KEPServerEX.
Lars, just to add to that, we're actually working on an interim solution because we know this is a desperate need for a lot of you folks. Probably by the end of this summer, we should have a small application that will allow you to export your database from TIA portal and then utilize KEPServer CSV import to pull that tag database in. So it won't be quite ready to go with native in the driver, though that is very high on the list to start working on soon. We're going to take a little interim step just to ease the pain for everybody on this front. So as soon as that's available, we will let people know. If it's something you're real interested in, get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to set you up with a beta once it's available.
Great. Thank you for that, Mike. Let's see. This is an interesting question. How is a link established between BACnet site and KEPServerEX when Kepware is in a remote location? Do you want to take that one, Mike? How do you establish a link between BACnet site and KEPServerEX when Kepware is in a remote location? So I assume they mean remote from the BACnet network.
Yeah, so that's possible. You're getting into the fun intricacies of BACnet networking. The network itself and which network it's on have to be well established. That the various BACnet devices have the ability to assign a network number to it. This becomes a question of IP routing largely. You may need a BACnet specific router depending on the application. If you've got more specific questions, it may be something we want to set up a phone call to do. If you were to just send an email to sales@Kepware, we could make that happen.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So what else do we have here?
Well, there's one, I think it was Joseph that asked about support for other building automation protocols, including LAN, Worx, and LAN. So, years ago, the decision was made from Kepware to go ahead and develop the BACnet IP driver to meet the vast market needs out there. We continue to sort of collect information and feedback and market interest on the other protocols. We just continue to see BACnet penetrating even further and growing in more markets than ever before. So while those other ones, whether it's Connex or LAN, definitely have some regional successes and some penetration, we'll probably continue to enhance our offering for BACnet for the near term. But certainly send us along some applications and some specific inquiries for the other protocols, and we'd be happy to try to address those.
Great. I have an IoT Gateway question here from Dario. It was noted that the new driver leverages the long-haul protocol and it's read-only. Is there any future plans to make this read-write? And yes, there are certainly plans to make this read-write. Can't speak to a timeline quite yet, but it's in the works, and that's definitely functionality that we want to enable our customers to be able to do. Someone asked about, let's see, the changes included in KEPServerEX version 5.20 support Logix v28. I don't have a lot of specifics off the top of my head for how that support was implemented, but again, you can read our release notes on the website. They might give you a little bit more detail, or just contact our technical support team, technical.support@kepware.com, and they might be able to dig into that for you a little bit.
Yeah, just Joanne, this is Ray. The primary focus of the V28 software was to support the new L8 version of the ControlLogix devices, which Alan Bradley released, I believe it was in November of last year. So these are new hardware designs, new controller designs that Alan Bradley has released to the industry. Also, V28, I think, supports and can be leveraged on some of the newest L7 models of the ControlLogix devices. And there are some sort of like architecture underlying support that we needed to re-engineer within our driver because of the changes that were made with the new controller. So it's not really high-level functionality differences. It's just supporting newer hardware and newer firmware that's available.
Okay, great. Kenneth asked about, and this will have to be our last question because we're just a little past the hour here, but abilities compared to the Edge server from ThingWorx. So comparing KEPServerEX to ThingWorx's Edge server, and I just like to say that I think that I'm not totally familiar with their Edge server solution. However, one of the reasons that we have been acquired by PTC, which also owns ThingWorx, is because they saw vast value in the breadth of connectivity we provide specifically to manufacturing environments. So the idea here is not only do we provide connectivity through REST and MQTT and some of those more typical protocols that you see in IoT platforms like ThingWorx, but we also provide a crazy amount, over 150 different types of protocols and types of communication we facilitate to PLCs in your automation environment, SNMP, BACnet like we discussed, and the list just goes on and on. So that's really the differentiator there. Okay, great, and thank you all for joining. Again, I had a question come in about upgrades just right at the end here. We do recommend that you upgrade to the newest version. It's always the best practice to do so. There's very rare instances where people, might experience something when upgrading, but it's very rare, so we always recommend that you upgrade. Thank you so much for joining. Again, we will send out the recording and the PDF of the slides in a couple of days, and we really appreciate everybody that came on the line, and especially people who it's very late or early in your day who joined us. So thank you so much. If we didn't get to your question, we'll try to get to and follow up with you afterwards, and we look forward to seeing you on one of these webinars again.